September event, James Brown came and presented on the topic of securing your server in the cloud. And we received some really good feedback from the group and asked him to come back and talk about some of the challenges in using LDAP and Active Directory solutions with these transforming technologies like cloud, mobile, decentralized networks. And so we're going to have James here talking about cross-platform user management in the cloud using JumpCloud's DiraaS as a service and providing a product demo, which several of you asked for. So just a note before we get started, so the phones are muted. In the control panel on the GoToWebinar, please provide any questions you may have along the way, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. So I'm excited to introduce James Brown, Chief Experience Officer at JumpCloud. So James, you got it.
Hi there. Thanks everyone for coming today. Let me just give you a little bit of get a little bit of my background, and I'll tell you a little bit about JumpCloud's background. My background is I've been in software as a software engineer for a long time now, coming close to 30 years. And started out in large enterprise and have been doing startups actually in the last 12 years or so. I did a previous startup focused on internet security, and that was kind of why I gave a talk on security when I was in Bellevue last month. Now I'm with a company called JumpCloud that is founded by Rajat Bhargava. Rajat is an 8-time serial entrepreneur with a number of successful exits, and we just recently started JumpCloud in 2013, and we're about a year and a half in. We started out as a user management, and the way we looked at user management, we looked at it primarily as server user management, so making it easier to manage users on your servers in the cloud or in the data center or in a colo, what have you. Through some customer research and through some trying to find market fit, we went through a phase where we went deeper in security, we went deeper in command orchestration, and ended up with what we call directory as a service that kind of brings together the security pieces, the user management, and the command orchestration under a single roof. Similar to the way AD looks at the world to a degree, right? In that AD, Active Directory, has this capability of not only managing your user accounts across your organization, but also being able to apply policy and even rudimentary capabilities to run commands on servers or set startup scripts and things like that. We realized after we heard a lot of feedback, once we had this set of functionality together, that what people really wanted was, hey, give me a way to get away from my AD or my LDAP server. They're difficult, they're not really designed for the cloud. And so that's where we jump off, and we've launched our directory as a service formally at the beginning of this month, actually. So this is a somewhat new path for us, but it's the culmination of many months of hundreds of customer interviews and a lot of feedback. So let me just dive right in. If you have any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat box, and we can answer them either as they come or as they, or at the end of the presentation. When I get through this deck, and this deck is relatively short, I'll be diving into a JumpCloud demo, and you can actually see what it looks like to use JumpCloud as your directory, and what the end user can see, say on a Linux server, and how that works. So, without further ado, the way I kind of look at this, and this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of doing it, is basically what are the steps to get a really disappointing directory experience? And I think it's appropriate because the trends that we're dealing with today in terms of cloud, OS 10 picking up in the enterprise, security issues, and the transition to SaaS, right? I think all add up to our existing directories don't work very well in our current environment, right? They have a number of issues that I'll dive into. I'll share some of the comments that some of the IT and system administrators have told us over the months that we've kind of gone through all of these hundreds of interviews, just picking out some of the more interesting ones that are very common that I think were expressed well. And finally, going ahead and doing that overview. So, what are the steps to be disappointed? So, first of all, use the cloud, right? AD and LDAP were built in an era when there was no cloud, right? Everything was built in a centralized network. There was a nice perimeter around it. Everything trusted each other. If you're an enterprise, you have multiple Active Directory domains in a trust, and you would have dedicated links between different offices. And there's a very different architecture than what we see today, right? So what we see today, of course, is this completely decentralized model, right? And if you're a recent startup, recent startups will see complete decentralization, right? They may not have anything that you could actually point to and say, here is our network, right? I mean, so I'll take our office, for example. We have no servers in our office. We have a wireless access point and a router, and that's it. We have a couple printers on the network, but there's nothing that would distinguish our office's network from any other place on the internet. So a coffee shop is just as good as our office from that perspective. So we don't look at the world that same way. We don't have any place to stick a server, so we couldn't build an AD server and host it and run it into our cloud. All of our equipment is in the cloud, and because of that, it makes it very difficult to centrally manage our users, right? And a traditional directory just doesn't really fit the bill. We're spread across multiple clouds. We're in CenturyLink, we're in AWS, we're in Rackspace, and I have to go through the list, but there's a number of different clouds that we're at, and so a centralized location for a directory just doesn't work for us, and it doesn't work for a lot of startups, right? Not just because of that, but what it creates then is this need to have this very complex networking structure and very secure complex networking structure, which is generally a contradiction in terms, right? So when I have servers in Cloud A and I have servers in Cloud B, and they all need to have a centralized directory source, I need to host my directory source somewhere and have a secure network link between the servers in Cloud A and Cloud B. If latency is a concern, I need to have my data replicated across the clouds. It becomes a very difficult and painful issue. Not to mention, can be very insecure if it's not done right. And so it takes a lot of networking knowledge, a lot of Active Directory management or LDAP management knowledge. So it's definitely a pain point that we hear over and over again. So manual management, right? Really, there is an API for LDAP and AD from a perspective of, hey, let's do remote updates, right? You can use different clients, usually thick clients, that speak LDAP to manage the directory server. But this isn't what most of the technology we use today does, right? I mean, the technology we use today is primarily driven based on REST APIs and web applications. So, these older directories, AD and LDAP, just don't have the ability to interact cleanly with kind of these traditional directories. JumpCloud, having been born in the cloud and with web technologies, has a full REST API as well as LDAP to consume authentication data. But that allows it to become, a first-class citizen in all of your different apps. You can manage, you can change passwords, you can set access controls. Gives you a whole different realm of control that you haven't had before, and you can write your own automation around it. The other thing that's kind of come up is Macintosh, right? Macs, Windows, and Linux, all coexisting in the same enterprise. Really used to be that Windows was the entire enterprise. There were Windows as far as the eye could see, and there was an Active Directory controller to control them all. Today, Mac OS has really taken off. It's taking a significantly larger market share, even in the enterprise. where enterprises struggle then to manage them. AD is capable of managing users with Macs because it has the LDAP capability, and it can do a couple of other things in terms of setting user IDs and things like that on a Mac. Linux doesn't work as well. You can put Samba with it and get the somewhat same level of control, but it's not a very good solution for it. And what we hear is that because AD is it's built by Microsoft, it's a Windows focused. Microsoft obviously has a vested interest in making sure that that AD helps to bring more of the Microsoft world into your organization. And so we hear a lot of people saying, I don't want that gateway into my organization. I don't want to have to go build a Microsoft server just so I can manage my systems. So really overdue to have a centralized management system that can really both set policy on machines as well as manage users across your whole organization. So using Active Directory in the cloud. So there's this is part of what I was talking about with the tendrils, right? I mean, I kind of look at Active Directory as kind of like a gateway drug. And the reason I say that is because Microsoft themselves, Microsoft's new CEO, Satya, and I forget his last name, I'm sorry, but he just said that Active Directory was Microsoft's single most important piece of property. And the reason that is pretty clear. It's because once you have Active Directory, now you can get all sorts of Microsoft tools that plug into it. And not just Microsoft tools, but a vast number of different third-party solutions that are designed to work with Microsoft, and whether it's with AD or AD Federation services, really kind of built into that. And so it gets to the point where there are certain applications that are very difficult to run if you aren't willing to go put in an Active Directory server. So this kind of starts some companies especially that have kind of grown up with Mac or grown up with Linux in a bad spot, because they need that same capability, they need that same directory abilities, but they don't want to go down the path of, okay, I don't want to go by Microsoft. That's not what my company does. So this is another area that can be a challenge. LDAP. The one thing we hear about LDAP, yes, it works. Yes, it's been around forever. It's a great tool. The issue is it's not a great tool to manage. It's very complex. It takes a lot of specialized knowledge just to set it up, and to set it up correctly, because it's I mean, when you think of LDAP, LDAP is almost like an empty database. It has no requirement around how data gets structured within it. And so it's very easy to build a structure that may work for one application or two applications, but may not work for all your applications. And once you get down the path of a broken structure, it's very difficult to back away from it and correct it. So what we hear from a lot of folks around LDAP is, I need an LDAP server. I know I need an LDAP server. I don't want to do AD, but I will. I don't want to manage it. I don't want to have to install it. I don't want to have to back it up. I don't want to have to all the wonderful things that you have to do when you build your own server for something. So those are kind of the things that, the pain points that can arise today that haven't necessarily been an issue in the past for a number of different reasons. But today's landscape really does kind of require a new solution. And JumpCloud is right there, covering all of those different areas. So must have a directory. Don't want to build my own LDAP. So this speaks to the complexity of LDAP. Duffy Cooley here that we've spoken to a number of times is an extremely experienced system administrator, and that experience has told him that he does not want to go down the path of dealing with this. So he has looked to us to build a directory and manage his directory, and then he can consume it. And I'll show you how that works a little bit later. The other kind of view of the world is here, I need a directory, I don't want Microsoft. Again, companies that don't have to have Microsoft, or they weren't born with Microsoft, want to stay away from it oftentimes. Just because they have an ecosystem that's OS 10 or Linux, and they're just not a Microsoft shop. So another concern that we run into is I've got a Server 2003 Active Directory server, and it's running and it works, but it's 2003, it's not secure anymore, Microsoft isn't supporting it, and I don't have a Windows admin anymore because it hasn't broken. So I don't want to go hire somebody new to go deal with it and go pay the cost to build another Active Directory server and upgrade everything. It turns into thousands in additional costs to get just to become kind of up to date to an operating system that's actually secure. So very concerning when companies are not seeing much value other than kind of basic user management from AD. It's a good jumping off point to see is there something new. And this is an interesting one that we've run up against a few times. Really is I'm trying to move everything to the cloud, right? And this is a very common refrain. And I've got an AD server. I can't get rid of my AD server. I can't put it someplace else. This is I think one of the last things that really is preventing people from getting 100% to the cloud. Once you have that AD server, you have to have a central trusted location for it. And it's really difficult to kind of take that and put it someplace else safely that will also ensure that you have minimal latency and things like that. So directory as a service. Rather than hosting a lot of LDAP or AD hosting companies actually do just that. They build an LDAP server for you, they stick it in the cloud and say, okay, there you go, run it. They build an AD server, stick it in the cloud, same thing. That's great, except for the fact that it's not automatically scalable and it's not fully distributed. It isn't designed to cover latency issues across the globe. It isn't designed to address reliability and failover and security and things like that. It's just a box that has the software running on it. So the way we look at directory as a service, directory as a service is truly a SaaS version of LDAP and AD. And right now in JumpCloud, we have a fully auto-scalable hosted LDAP solution. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to know how to manage an LDAP schema at all. It's a very straightforward user interface, very easy to add and remove users from your network across multiple servers, and with the added benefit that you can actually have your own users take care of their password, take care of their SSH keys, take care of their two-factor authentication through a very easy to use end user portal. The web app world really allows us to say, we don't have to have a central console like on AD where there's a central box that only a few people can get access to. We've got a central console, we've got a console that all of the administrators can log into, but all of your end users can also log in and manage things that that are not critical to your organization. So that really reduces the load on your administrative staff. Password resets, it's completely web-based. There's no need to involve a system administrator. Changing SSH keys, very, very straightforward. So just a completely different paradigm with directory as a service versus kind of a hosted version of AD or LDAP. Management of Windows, Mac, and Linux devices. So JumpCloud is kind of really two parts. It's a hosted LDAP solution, and that's two parts today. It's going to become multiple parts here as we go. But a hosted LDAP solution as well as an agent that runs on your Windows, Mac, and Linux devices. And that agent allows you then to manage local user accounts on those devices, which then gives you the ability to say, even if that system loses network connectivity to JumpCloud or to anywhere else, you can still log into those servers. You can still access them because the accounts are actually local on those machines. And you can couple that with LDAP for your applications, or you can use LDAP entirely as your authentication mechanism. We are very soon, in a matter of weeks, adding SAML-based single sign-on. Because we are a centralized directory, we have the information necessary to be an identity provider so that we can actually provide single sign-on externally to your organization. We'll also be adding Kerberos here very soon to do single sign-on internally the same way AD can do it, or Samba. And one of the best parts of it, you don't have to build servers, you don't have to back them up, network them, secure them, maintain them. All of that's taken care of just as a part of the service. So this is just kind of showing the overall breakdown that JumpCloud truly is a directory database first and foremost, and speaks a number of different protocols to enable different capabilities. On the left, you have SaaS apps. This is going to be handled by SAML, also by API authentication. So we actually have a REST API for authentication, something that can make it very easy to do authentication from client apps or server apps, through JavaScript, very straightforward. LDAP for on-premise, for both servers and on-premise apps, to be able to authenticate users in a very straightforward way. And finally, being able to extend your users through our agents to the cloud, where you can manage local user accounts, run commands, apply policies. For example, the Poodle SSL vulnerability. Applying patches and applying configuration changes for that can be very painful to do if you're just going one machine at a time, or even if you're going with a tool that is SSH based, where you're connecting out to that machine, where there may be firewalls and intervening, there may be other issues. With the JumpCloud agent, it actually calls out to our service, so you actually have full control, regardless of your networking, of those machines, when they're reporting, and you can control them anytime, as well as manage users across them. So it makes it a little bit easier problem to solve when you're talking the patching issues like that, or setting particular configs, such in the case of Poodle, where you're trying to disable SSL v2 and v3. So this whole thing is for naught if it's not secure and reliable, right? We understand that because we are a directory provider, we have a big target painted on our chest, and security is very, very important to us. Most of our engineering team comes from a security background, fortunately, so we've been able to leverage a lot of that. You can see some of the fruits of our efforts there on the left, in terms of the different layers of security, different things that we do around security. And we meet monthly to identify new security issues, and also to create new tasks for the engineering schedule to add even more and more layers of security. This is something that's an ongoing concern for us, something that we take very seriously, and something that we have a strong background in. On the reliability side, again, because we have the agent, you can do local user account. That means that regardless of whether JumpCloud is available, those systems keep running. You can still authenticate to them, still manage them. If you're looking to do LDAP, we're running our LDAP servers in 3 AWS availability zones, and we're adding CenturyLink LDAP servers here soon. And what this means then is that there will be 4 locations that you can fall back to in case one of our server locations fails. So a lot of redundancy, and each of those instances of LDAP servers is actually isolated from the rest of our architecture. So our database that manages those servers is isolated from those LDAP instances, so that even if our central capability or central database, central architecture fails for any reason, those will keep running by themselves. They have their own local databases to serve authentication requests. And then something else that we're working on now that should be out very soon is the ability to run your own LDAP replica. And the way this would work is that you'd be able to have an LDAP instance in your network, whether it's in your cloud or on your premises, that will sync directly to our LDAP servers and pull all of the information down, and then you can do local authentication against that LDAP server so that you have some control over where that server is, and you can break it off, for example, if there's some issue that comes along. And finally, our entire company is based on DevOps practices, so we can actually rebuild our entire environment in under an hour. So very secure, very reliable, things that are easy for us to do because this is what we do every day, difficult for others to do, obviously, to replicate all of this different security and reliability. So, bringing that benefits of SaaS to bear. So finally, we look at directories of services as offering three main benefits. That it's simple, so very simple UI. There is no understanding needed of how users get created on local accounts on servers or in LDAP. It's very straightforward. Ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It's in the cloud. You can access it from anywhere you are. And not only you, but all of your end users can also access what they need. And finally, it is secure. So, I'm open to questions at this point, and then we can dive into a demo and do a few more questions if there are any at that point.
Yeah, we've got some good questions out here, and a couple are related to the demo. So first is I see a lot of resistance from the Mac OS folks around Microsoft, AD, ADFS. So what's the primary reason for them, what's holding them back from building up something competitive to provide a viable alternative? What are you seeing in the industry?
So, my view, and this this may be a little jaded. I'll preface it that way. My view is that Microsoft has a very strong interest in protecting their AD and their Windows franchise, and it makes it very difficult for them to say, let's move away from AD. Let's move to something like a directory as a service. So Windows Azure AD is interesting. It's an interesting offering in that it requires an on-premise AD server and AD Federation services, which I understand is very expensive, to be able to serve identity into the Azure AD service. And the Azure AD service itself is actually not AD. It's actually an SSO-like offering and aimed at doing SSO for applications. So it's a little different. I think because of who Microsoft is and because of where they play, I think they're in a position where it's very difficult for them to kind of move and build the kind of support and build an offering that's very different from what they have today.
Cool. Okay. And then LDAP, the main differences between AD and ADFS and LDAP?
So LDAP is a directory. It's actually a directory protocol, but it's also called Open LDAP is an application that implements the LDAP protocol, and LDAP stores user information, and it stores what their authorizations, basically. And so, and I'm sorry, would you say the question again?
Yeah, it was the difference between AD and ADFS and then LDAP.
Oh, sorry. So AD is actually a much wider offering than LDAP, right? It's a combination of LDAP, and which provides the directory services, all of the pieces that actually authenticate you with a machine, but it also contains Kerberos, which allows you to do single sign-on. So when you're on a Windows network and you've got a Windows computer joined to a domain, once you log into that Windows computer, you can then access file shares that are on the same domain without having to log in again. And you can actually run programs on different computers without having to log in, because once you're authenticated once, Active Directory then handles the authentication through Kerberos. The other thing that AD does, a couple of things it does, is allow you to push policy to your different Windows computers. And policy means things like password complexity, what's going to show up on the desktop, what can my users access, can they go to control panels, can they add and remove programs, can they, what is their startup script, it's, if any. And it's just there's probably 1,000 different things that AD lets you push down, as well as providing print services. So AD is a pretty broad offering, bringing a number of things together. Probably the best analog to that on the Linux world would be Free IPA or Red Hat Enterprise Directory Services. They're similar offerings that have those things bundled.
Got it.
And AD Federation Services is actually adding single sign-on, external single sign-on for your Active Directory. So it actually competes with, say, Ping Identity and Okta and Centrify and a lot of these other SSO providers because it's providing a SAML interface to your AD directory.
Great. Now, there's two other questions here, and you may want to roll them into your demo.
Okay.
And the first is obviously Azure, AD, and AD on-prem, they're pretty well integrated. And so talk a little bit more about the differences between your directory as a service and theirs, the equivalence to AWS and the on-prem, their AD option, and then when you get into the demo, is there an opportunity to display an example of SAML 2.0? So you can answer those now, or it might be appropriate to talk to it as you get into the demo.
Okay. So SAML 2.0, our SAML offering is in development right now. I'd say we're a few weeks away yet. I can't show anything today, but it is coming very soon. And as far as the differences between AD and Azure, as well as the new AWS offering, so our goal, and we are not here yet. We're building out protocol support for a number of different protocols, including SAML and Kerberos, and we'll be adding Radius and some things like that. Our goal is to provide a service that can replace Active Directory. And so the difference right now is that we're not offering Kerberos, so that's something that we're building. But we can manage your users. We can extend your Active Directory to the cloud, or we will be very, very soon. We can do some of the policy management that AD does. So that's kind of the primary difference between us and AD and Federation Services right now. The Amazon Directory Services offering really is, in my view, a very early offering in terms of what it actually does. It really is, under the covers from what we can tell, a Samba instance running on a Linux instance on AWS that allows you then to replicate either replicate your AD to a directory in AWS to make it so that you can locally access your directory data, or provides a Samba instance that you can then populate through LDAP protocol directly in that server. So, or actually, you populate it through the AD client management tools. So it's a pretty early offering. It's very basic in terms of what it does. It doesn't add any new functionality. What it's basically giving you a way to do is to access your AD data from an AWS VPC. And I hope that answered the question. So let me dive in.
Go into the demo.
Okay. So let me just make sure I'm still logged in here. Okay. So users are the primary data object in JumpCloud. And managing users is incredibly simple. To add a user to your organization, to anything that, to access any of your computers or applications, you're going to basically filling in this page as an administrator. So let's say let's just do Jim, and we'll just say and we'll make Jim an administrator, and we will keep his UID consistent across all servers. So one of the issues that we've run into with a lot of customers that don't have a directory yet is, they've worked in a world where users have been added one by one to all of their different machines, and now they're in a position where they don't have consistent user IDs and group IDs across their machines. It makes it very difficult for them to to actually migrate into a directory, right? It just increases the cost level to actually get there and make everything work. So one of the things that JumpCloud allows you to do is to start getting down that path, and if there are any conflicts in your environment, we'll flag them for you and you can go fix those. So let's just do and we'll just add the user. So once this saves, the user's created in JumpCloud, and now as an administrator, I can go grant this user access to any of my different servers that I want. So in this case, I'm just going to add J. Palmieri, and it will get access to these 2 servers. Meanwhile, and so now my job is done. I've given Jim his login. I've given Jim his his access to his servers. I'm done. I'm going to lunch. What Jim gets then is an email that says, hey, come sign up for JumpCloud. It contains a link that you click. It also includes, for example, your company logo and your name, your system administrator's name, and system administrator's email, just in case you have any questions. And this email then directs Jim to go click and go into an end user portal where he can then set his password, he can set up his SSH keys, set up Google Authenticator to do multi-factor authentication. And once that's done, his keys and his password will be sent to all the different machines that he's got access to. So, in the most basic case, and this is really kind of the agent case as well as the LDAP case, Jim really is ready to go. He's got access wherever he needs access, and off he goes. The administrator also can manage passwords, also can manage public keys, but really it's designed for the end user to take care of their own information. So they can change things like their password, their first name, last name, and then also manage their own public keys. So once this occurs, once this user is added, and this user hasn't accepted, so it's not really not a true user just yet, then we then actually expose the user through our LDAP service, and you can choose to enable it or not, and you authenticate to it using two numbers, both basically your organization ID and your API key, and that prevents users from being able to log in without any kind of authentication to your system or to your data. So, for example, I've got these scripts out here that do just to run a few different very easy LDAP search commands that go and look at things like getting all the users on the server. So in this case, I've got myself and I've got another user that are both active users, and you can see that my SSH keys are presented through LDAP. That I've got group information, and I can look at all the different groups that will be applied to the different servers that are out there, as well as groups of names, which are traditionally used for application management, telling me which applications I can actually access. So, you've got a very straightforward, very easy to use management tool for all of your users, a REST API that can also populate these users for you, either directly, or we've got some example scripts to just import a CSV file to load everything into JumpCloud. And in a matter of days, we are releasing our Active Directory bridge. And what that will look like is actually an agent that installs on your Active Directory server, which then syncs a subdirectory on your to your JumpCloud account. So, or sorry, a group to your JumpCloud account. So there'll be a JumpCloud group. Any users or groups that you put into that group will then get synced over to JumpCloud, and their access will then be reflected into JumpCloud, including their password, their name, email, and their authorization. So in JumpCloud, the way we do authorization is pretty straightforward. So we have these things called tags, and tags associate users with systems. Excuse me. And what tags that you do then is just say, these users get access on these systems, or these users get access, and excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here. Or these users get access to these different applications through their tag name. One of the things that's somewhat unique to JumpCloud is that you can expire access for users. I'm sorry, apologize. You can actually expire access at a particular time, so that, oh, very sorry. If you have a user that is, if you have a user, say a developer, that you want to allow access to production servers for a temporary period, say at the end of the day you want them to be removed, you can easily express that and say, end the access to these servers for this user at this particular time. And let's see here. So another thing you can do is actually run commands against your servers. And you can run them against one server, you can run them against wow, thanks for bearing with me. You can run them against one server, multiple servers, get the results back. You can see here I've run a command through PowerShell on a Windows host, getting the current average CPU usage and getting the results back in a fully tracked way that you can access also through our REST API. You can do things like audit your servers. You can run commands on Linux to go get your disk size and CPU, or you can apply packages. You can say, let's update, fix Heartbleed, let's update OpenSSL. There's a variety of different things you can do in terms of running commands on your servers. And these commands are not just associated with a server, they can be associated with a tag. And as that tag changes, say for example, if you've got a set of servers in an autoscale group, then you can have commands be applied to that entire set of servers automatically. And what that lets you do then is to say, when some event happens, apply some command to all 50 servers in this autoscale group to do something, grab information, copy logs, restart a service, what have you. So it gives you a very easy way to dynamically interact with your servers en masse and be able to execute commands, capture the results, and really have a centralized management across your Linux, Windows, and Mac systems. Additionally, you can run them on a schedule, or you can run them through a trigger, which is based on webhooks. A very simple HTTPS request allows you to run any command you like, and you can actually put commands into a workflow and run commands that kind of cascade from one set of servers to another, so that you can say, if I'm doing a code deploy, I can then, restart. I can download some code to my app servers. I can apply some database updates. I can go back and restart my app servers. All of that can be done through, through workflows. And finally, being able to actually execute commands when a user gets added or deleted from a server. So when JumpCloud adds a user to a server, so for example, you have an autoscale group, the system comes up and says, hey, I'm in this tag. it gets all of the users that go with that tag. When those users get added, then you can then run a command based on that and then take some specific action. So for example, being able to add those users to a database, right? To a MySQL instance or an Oracle instance, and say, set up all their permissions, and that user gets added. Additionally, when the user gets deleted, you can remove all of that access, or you can archive their directories or things like that. So it gives you quite a bit of power around what you can do to apply policies or command systems to do different things. And this will be extended over time to having much more of what kind of Active Directory GPOs look like, in that they'll have more pre-built commands to do things like setting password complexity and setting what shows up on the desktop and things like that. You can do everything you can do all of that stuff right now, just so you have to write the code yourself. So we'll be adding more and more of that in terms of templates as we go. So that is JumpCloud. As I say, we're adding coming out with our Active Directory bridge here any day, and we'll be coming out with SAML here in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to getting those both out there. Are there any?
We've got a couple of really good questions,
okay.
So I'll just start telling you them, and then you could answer them in context of your demo or your presentation. So typical back-end enterprise, like SAP ERP, have many directory services calls, and they're making it many times per unit, per minute, per hour, per day. Mm-hmm. So how does JumpCloud deal with the round-trip latencies and resulting failure dominoes in the back-end applications?
Sure. So a couple of different ways, right? One is through the fact that we have different LDAP endpoints in different locations in the world, and there'll be basically GeoIP lookups to find the nearest one. So that reduces latency initially. The other way is, I talked about the LDAP sync capability, being able to have an LDAP server on site, which then is completely managed by JumpCloud, but provides you that local authentication source so that you have near zero latency on site.
Got it. Okay, great. And then what about how does one federate a user across multiple enterprises?
So this is something that we're looking at, and we have actually some very interesting ideas around it that I can't go into right now, but we intend to make it easier than domain trusts to do that. Because one of the cases that we hear a lot from our customers is, hey, my company acquires a lot of companies, and it's very difficult to integrate their directories into a centralized directory. And so that problem has spurred a lot of interesting conversation, and I think we're going to have some pretty unique IP around it, but that's not immediate term.
Okay, good. And then in terms of security of JumpCloud, so a lot of user information stored in JumpCloud. Now, how secure is your application end to end?
So, if you looked at the list of different layers of security that we put in place, you can get a sense for kind of what we're doing to protect our databases. Now, the security level is only as good as the people accessing the data, right? So, when you log into the JumpCloud console, you do have the opportunity to turn on multi-factor authentication. Because it is so critical, we recommend that everybody do that. Not everybody does that, but and they may suffer the same fate as, say, MongoDB. But turning on multi-factor authentication of the console will help you to completely isolate, at least your console access from anybody else, right? So one of the big issues that you run into is password reuse, right? JumpCloud is not a place to reuse a password. Really, no place is a place to reuse a password, but there are some that are worse than others. So that's why we always recommend using multi-factor authentication, so that even if your password is compromised, somebody can't get into your account. That's the primary way that we recommend isolating or protecting your account. Now our LDAP our LDAP setup is controlled through ACL isolation. So each different organization has a separate access control list that isolates its data from every other. So there is no potential for bleed between accounts or anything like that. And instead of authenticating with a username and a password, which is, username can be easily obtained in a number of different ways, and the password is only as good as the person creating the password. We actually use, multi-byte keys that for both both the name of the directory and the bind location and the authentication password. So, we're talking the equivalent password, being 40 characters long, and the username being 50 characters long. So, a lot of thought put toward, let's make sure that this data gets protected.
So what about, I'm putting my directory out in the cloud. What about reliability? What do you, in terms of 24/7 coverage, and reliability of access to your different systems that you have plugged into this?
Yeah. So as I said, we're hosted in 3 different availability zones. So we've got 3 different instances of our infrastructure that's hosting our backend infrastructure and our LDAP endpoints. We have the extension into the CenturyLink cloud here that's coming very soon, and this idea of using a local LDAP instance as a synchronized, as a way to provide even more reliability. Now, each of those things are completely decoupled from kind of our central infrastructure, right? So it's our central infrastructure, which then replicates to our LDAP instances. Those are isolated and separate, and they're completely autonomous. And then this hosted LDAP instance is also separate and completely autonomous from those. So you're building up layers of fallback as you go, and you can keep extending those layers as long as you want. And then on the agent side, because the agent manages local user accounts, once the account is there, users can then access it, right? The only thing that you lack then is the ability to go change it. But once the system reports back on to the internet, then that ability comes back and we resync the users back down.
Got it. Excellent. I think we have time for about one more question. So how do you support key expiry in terms of the features and manageability?
So a couple of ways. So in terms of keys, actually let me go here. So basically your API key can be recycled anytime you like on a per user basis. Each user gets their own key so that the activities that user is taking is fully auditable and identified with their credentials. When a user, say a user is leaving the company, to remove them from everything in your company, so all servers, the LDAP instance across the board, it's as easy as selecting the user and clicking delete. Once that's done, everything gets pushed across your entire organization. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Very good. One last thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about there's different SSO vendors, Ping, Okta, OneLogin. Any big differences that you want to highlight with the JumpCloud solution?
Sure. So we actually look at the SSO vendors as complementary to us in terms of we are not going to become a Ping or an Okta or any of these guys. That's not where we want to play. We are doing very minimal SAML-based SSO because we've had the request so many times, but we don't intend to go down the path that they've taken and actually handle custom websites that don't handle SAML or OAuth, ones that actually have to require custom code to be able to log into. Those guys are always going to be the best at that. what we see ourselves fitting in though is as the directory that feeds their feeds their tool, just as AD does, just as LDAP does today, right? They just simply plug in. And in fact, we had a number of users ask us, hey, I've got Jira, I've got Confluence, I need an LDAP directory, but I want to set it up. Well, here you go. We're your directory in the cloud, so you turn this on and point Jira at us, and off you go. A lot of users, OpenVPN is another one that comes up a lot. I need to have a VPN server. There's no SaaS-based VPN service. So a lot of users will actually set up OpenVPN and point it to us to manage their users.
That's good. Excellent. Well, I think we're about out of time. James, thank you very much for running this, presenting at this webinar. Any final questions or responses, I should say?
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for bearing with my coughing, bearing with me through my coughing fit.
Go get some water.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all for attending, and we'll get this this recording posted out on the site. Take care.
Thanks.